Well, good day, viewers. Today we have a 2007 F150 extended cab with a history of the MIL flashing, which means we have a misfire severe enough to be damaging the catalyst, and it shakes. It's not flashing now. I just want to see what it sounds like in clear flood mode in case we have a... Let's close this damn door. Listen to the sound of the engine in clear flood mode, wide open throttle. So it has no lopiness to it, so I don't think we have a serious mechanical problem. I suspect a failed coil or plug or something like that. But we're going to throw the scanner on it and scan it for codes. So I've loaded the previous vehicle record. I'm just going to briefly look at it to see if there was any. So back in November 1st of 2020, it had random cylinder misfire in cylinder number 5. And that was the last time it was in here, for at least on the scanner. So we're going to scan it now and see what codes it has to offer. I suspect a failed coil, because that's pretty common on these. This is a 4.6, I believe, which means it doesn't have the 5.4 3-valve nasty spark plug scenario. I'm pretty sure it's a 4.6 anyways. Should auto ID. It should look at the mileage while it's doing this. Sure, because I looked at the mileage, it pulled at 244, 760 or 759. Let's do a network code scan. And of course it's a pre-scan. I got a battery charger on it, set at 13.5 volts. Cylinder 2 misfire detected. Misfire on startup. Evap vent control fault. You did have the check engine light on prior to it starting to flash, so this evap vent solenoid problem is probably secondary. Cylinder 2 misfire, and misfire on the startup. Did it finish the network scan yet? I think it is. Let's go into engine. And data display. I wonder if this is going to be misfire data. I don't think it gives us misfire counters. It might, because it's after 06. I know that prior to 06 they didn't. You had to go into mode 6 data to see misfire counters. Yeah, cylinder 2 average misfires over the last 10 drive cycles, 2,949. Kind of looks like cylinder 2. Let's see if it's currently misfiring. Let's try a cylinder balance test. That might be under functional tests. Cylinder contribution test. You want to make sure it is actually cylinder number 2 that's got the miss. Why does it say no communication? Well, I think instead of doing that, I'm going to, we could do a relative compression test and injector flow test, but I think I'm going to run it and see that the miss is actually on number 2 by unplugging number 2 coil. So looking at the engine on the passenger side, the right bank, it's numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. So the second cylinder on the right bank is cylinder number 2, and on the left bank it's numbered 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's that coil back there. This is number 1 injector. This is number 2 injector. So I'm going to try unplugging number 2 injector because it's easier to get to. The coil's not that bad. It's right there. Okay, I'm going to try unplugging that while it's running and see if it makes any difference. So I'm going to unplug number number 1 and then number 2 injector, because I slipped the number 2 injector connector off and put some dielectric grease on it already. So I'm going to start it and run it and note the misfire. We're going to pull that coil out and check the spark on it. So because it made no difference when I unplugged number 2 injector, that kind of proves that number 2 is not running. It doesn't prove it just isolates it to a specific cylinder. These connectors are, well, that's number 1 ignition coil. Number 2 ignition coil is back here. Now let's unplug this fuel pressure sensor so you can see the connector better. Man, this thing is dirty. Well, I'm going to get some stuff out of the way, this air pipe PCV hose out of the way. So I'm having fun getting this coil retaining bolt out here. It's right directly below the fuel pressure sensor, pressure temperature sensor. So you can't get a socket on it straight. It's supposed to be 7 mil, but as you can see, all of these are rusty. It's not, the coil is turning underneath it, but I've had them rust into the manifold. There's like little nuts built into the manifold. This is cast aluminum manifold. I also see coolant seeping in the top front corner here on this intake manifold, so guaranteed there's corrosion on the manifold. But that's a minor issue. I haven't looked at the coolant reservoir. It's not empty, so I got these little reverse easy outs, but I can't get in here. Wow, this is, I thought it was going to be easy because it was one of the easier coils to get to, but no, it's got to fight me. So I managed to get the bolt out, what's left of it. You can see that the insert in the coil is corroded right to it. And there's evidence of antifreeze in that spark plug hole. I used one of these reverse easy outs from Snap-on. So maybe that coolant leak is causing the issue because it might have saturated the spark plug hole with antifreeze. Well, we get some compressed air and blow it out. So I got the coil plugged into number 2 and I got number 2 injector unplugged so it won't deliver any fuel. And I'm going to check for spark with a spark tester on that existing coil. See if we got spark. Yeah, I can hear the spark. So the problem is because of the antifreeze in number 2 spark plug hole. So I'm going to use some compressed air to blow into that spark plug hole. There's quite a bit of coolant in there. I'm going to remove the plug and have a look at it. So there's a look into that spark plug hole with the antifreeze blown out. There's so much rust and gum filled around the spark plug I can't get the socket on it. This thing needs the intake manifold resealed. And that's a nasty job. I bet you there's going to be broken bolts in these aluminum housings here. I've done a couple of these old girls and that's a pain. All the coils have to come off. I'm sure that the misfire is caused by the spark plug being saturated with antifreeze. Well, I'm having difficulty getting that spark plug out of there. There's so much crap around the spark plug, I can't get a socket on it. Now I got the socket stuck down there. If this was a 5.4, the coolant wouldn't leak this way because it's not prone to that kind of a problem. You can see the carbon tracking down the spark plug. Gap's pretty wide too. So you can see the carbon tracking on the plug. I wiped it off and it didn't wipe off that line. So the antifreeze in that bore has caused a problem. We're going to clean the threads out as best we can. Put another spark plug and another coil in it. Make sure that it runs okay before we get too carried away with other repairs here. So I got a new plug and a new coil in number 2, and we're going to start it up and see how it runs. Got an exhaust leak as well. Still seems to be misfiring. Let's have a look at the misfire counters now. So we'll do Snap-on's version of a cylinder contribution test. It's not quite as pretty as IDS Ford version. Basically, any negative numbers indicate the cylinder is not contributing as much. So cylinder number 4 is the back cylinder on the driver's side, or right side. It's probably got antifreeze in it too. It's misfiring as well, although not as bad as number 2 was. So I was right, the cylinders are number 1, 2, 3, 4 down the right bank. So number 4 cylinder is at the very back, and I suspect it's got coolant in it too, because the coolant runs from the intake port, or the intake manifold crossover passage, down the right bank cylinder head surface and floods the spark plug holes. It misses number 1 usually, but it collects in number 2, 3, 4. So I suspect number 4 is probably carbon track too as well. Got to discuss these repairs with the customer, because this is going to get, I'm going to have a look at the truck generally, because it'd be stupid. It has exhaust leaks as well. Exhaust manifold bolts are broken in the head. I want to take a general look at the frame on this thing and see how bad it is. Well, the body doesn't look as bad as I've seen on some. And the frame looks fairly solid, although it's rusty, of course. It's got a pinion seal leak. It probably has movement in the pinion bearings. See the brake hose, or the vent hose, hanging down here. Gas tank straps are pretty rusty up in the frame there. Transfer case output shaft seal is leaking. The exhaust crossover is pretty flimsy. Look at that exhaust manifold bolt. There's nothing left of it. It's like melted candle wax. Even this one on this side. And the exhaust manifolds are leaking on both banks, and this is a huge pain in the ass job to do. Power steering line is leaking. That's power steering fluid here. Well, gotta do some serious soul searching on this thing, because fixing that intake manifold requires me an intake manifold R&R. It's probably going to need all the coils, all the hold down bolts. Exhaust has been repaired. It's got a newer muffler on it. Newer brake calipers on the back. Yeah. I don't like the sound of things creaking when I'm underneath the truck. Let's have a closer look at this frame. So that's the coil at a number 4, and there's no antifreeze in the spark plug hole. That's interesting. So we're going to put a coil and plug in that hole and see how it runs. So there's a plug out of number 4, and you can see the carbon track line on it right there. So the boot has a similar line, so it's getting a new plug and a boot and a coil assembly. I'm not going to bother just changing the boot. It's no longer misfiring now. So those are good numbers. It's running smooth. But this thing needs the intake manifold removed, and it's going to need the crossover gaskets replaced. I know that's going to be a pain in the ass. Plus it needs exhaust manifolds done, exhaust crossover bolts replaced. Exhaust is in poor shape. The frame's not bad. It's not pristine by any means, but it's not as rotten as some might seem. And it has play in the left front wheel bearing and upper ball joint, so we'll have to have a serious heart-to-heart on this vehicle, because it's going to ratchet up pretty quickly, the cost of these repairs. And to be honest, there's not a lot of resale value in this vehicle as it stands. So I'm going to clear all the codes and talk it over with the customer.